Hello and welcome to another episode of PonderCast. This is your host, Danish Zaidi, and today we have a renowned Twitter sensation, investor, and economist with us. I know him from Twitter, so get to learn a lot from his tweets. He's Abdul Rehman. Welcome to the show, Abdul Rehman.
Thank you, Danish, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you so much for joining us on such a short notice. So I think maybe I think we can start with the basics. Maybe we can start with the a background of what you did in the earlier life. How was your childhood? Maybe some bit of that, and in that case, we can transition into the other things.
Yeah, so I was born in Karachi, and all my schooling up till A levels was in Karachi. First in Beacon House, then in St. Patrick's High School. Then I went for graduation to University of Warwick in UK. So that was a really good experience, and did that for 3 years. Then after that, spent some time in the family business, and from 2019 onwards, it was my personal passion as well to become an investor in the stock market. So I've been investing in the stock market since 3-4 years now, and doing that, I've learned a lot about the Pakistani economy as well. And mashallah, the journey has been going really well, and hope to continue this way in the future as well.
Awesome. So I think we would be going into the nitty-gritties. So but ye ke pehle we can probably discuss, so you mentioned about the family business. Tell us about the family business. What kind of family business was it, and how it influenced your experience towards becoming an investor?
So we were doing shipbreaking at that time because we were based in Karachi, and basically we were into steel and a bit of construction as well. But luckily, I had an older brother as well who was 5 years older than me. So by the time I joined the business, he was already established and was handling everything. So it gave me that liberty to maybe try something on my own. And that was the reason I had been reading a lot of books from famous investors and listening to their podcasts and their interviews. So that gave me the inspiration. And then I just took a leap of faith a few years back to do this full time. And basically, it all started off with reading newspapers, learning about the Pakistani economy, learning about different businesses through companies' annual reports and different other reports as well, which come out in the media. So that's how you develop an understanding of which businesses are doing well, which businesses are struggling. And at the end of the day, when you're investing in the stock market, you are investing in a business. So when you develop that insights into the business, you kind of develop what is the profit making ability of that company. And that is at the core of finding the value of a company.
Makes absolute sense. And I think that's a fascinating experience and how it basically transitioned you in a seasoned investor. So I think you alluded to the Pakistani economy. So I think you are well placed to answer some of the economy questions as well. And I think in that particular case, I was reading this, report by IMF. Their director Geeta, they mentioned that in 2023 and 2024, there wouldn't be any kind of, economic uplift globally, not just in Pakistan. So from that standpoint, what do you think about the current state of economy in Pakistan, and is there any kind of hope for the growth in 2023 and 4? I think we are on the leg of 2023, so maybe 2024 and onwards.
Yeah, so the IMF reports which come out even on the global side as well, they have been projecting very low growth in terms of what we have seen in the last decade probably. And I think the core reason for that is that global interest rates have risen. Since 2018 financial crisis, we had been at a time where global interest rates were close to zero. They were 1%, 2% in some countries, and in some countries they were actually negative as well. But now the US rates are close to 4 to 5%. So that is having an impact on the global GDP as well. But having said that, we have seen countries like India and some other like rising countries as well, which are performing really well. So we cannot blame our misfortunes entirely on the global roadmap or the global outlook. Our region has been performing really well, and even though there has been a rise of global inflation since 2020, but Pakistan's inflation, which is cumulatively has been almost around 100% in the last 3 years. But all the other factors are affecting India as well. It is affecting Bangladesh as well, but they are doing relatively well. So there are problems in how we manage our economy as well. Definitely, no two ways about that.
Makes absolute sense. And I think so if we go deeper into this one, so what ails Pakistani economy if, for example, we just pinpoint on one single problem? Is it the discontinuity of policy from the political lens? Is it basically the elite capture, or you can say the mismanagement or the corruption, or a mixture of all of these things, in your opinion?
I think if you look at it from a macro point of view, at the end of the day, two important numbers are your inflows and outflows of foreign currency
Mhm, mhm.
and how much fiscal deficit you are doing.
Yeah.
So you would see that in every IMF program, these are the two basic metrics. So in terms of our dollar inflows and outflows, our exports are constantly much below our imports. So if we have to put Pakistan on a consistent growth, then we have to improve our exports. There is no other way. And similarly,
Yeah.
if we have to kind of make the Pakistani economy a balanced economy, we have to control our expenditures as well as raise our revenues as well. So it's at the end of the day, you can't spend more than what you're earning. So that is both in terms of the trade as well as what you're doing on the fiscal side. Let me give you an example. Like last year, as in FY22, our imports were north of $75 billion, but exports were only close to 30 to 35 billion dollars.
Yeah.
We cannot continue with this deficit, and there has to be a way to increase our exports for Pakistani economy to prosper. And similarly, on the fiscal side, in the last 3 4 years, our fiscal deficits have been close to 7%. These are unsustainable levels for any country. Even if US goes on this trajectory, their currency will come under pressure after some time. So globally, the sweet spot is around your deficits should not be greater than your growth rate. So if we are growing at 3 4%, are both of these deficits, current account deficit as well as the fiscal deficit, should be close to that range as well. If you do that, then your uh, GDP, debt to GDP levels stay at a constant rate. So these are two things which Pakistan should focus on. And like you said, it is elite capture as well as bad policies as well, lack of having the courage to increase prices of energy because they are imported. The politicians don't want to increase the inflation for the civilization, but at the end of the day, you can't have so much subsidies that it kind of backfires on your currency.
Makes absolute sense, and I think that's a fascinating insight. Um, so if we basically, I think you alluded to that, but I would like to go deeper into that further. So I think you mentioned about uh, the rent seeking. So for example, we do have the exports versus import deficit, uh, uh, and basically on the fiscal cheat. So if we just talk about the rent seeking, is it the habit, or is it basically because we are seeing that the other countries in the region uh, maybe not growing inclusively, but they do have the growth and the sustainable growth. But if you talk about Pakistan, in that case, we do have the boom bust cycles every now and then. If we get 6% of growth, in that case, we deplete our resources, and the economy heats up. So what's your opinion based on basically first on the rent seeking and why the boom bust cycles are coming?
I think my perspective on rent seeking is that at the end of the day, it is bad policies and bad governance. Uh,
Yeah.
Nobody in this world has more power than the government. There is no single individual in Pakistan who has more power than the government. If the government can make the policies, the right policies, there is no way this rent seeking can continue. And rent seeking, it has been there in other countries as well. For example, in Korea, but their rent seeking was more towards export industries like
Yeah.
Samsung and other companies as well in the Far East. If you study their history, they have some aspect of rent seeking as well, but their rent seeking was benefiting the country. But here we are
Absolutely.
making such bad policies that there is rent seeking, but it is not benefiting Pakistan as well. So I think
Yeah.
the full responsibility goes on the people who are making the decisions, and blaming the businessmen or the industrialists, maybe it gives it's easy to pinpoint on a few people, and it kind of it's easy to make that kind of campaign for political gains, but at the end of the day you are giving them that policy. They don't have that much power that they can force you to make that policy. Maybe they are vested interest and some aspects of financial remuneration as well, but at the end of the day it is the government's job to make a good policy and direct the country towards the right direction.
Absolutely. So I think you mentioned about uh, the Korean example where they also have the rent seeking, but they are investing in the right sectors. And I
Mhm.
think there is a transition towards the economic geoeconomy, for example, and there is basically a recent agriculture uh, decision that they have taken. Uh, so do you see any kind of change from that lens, or do you think, because uh, I was reading this article by Uzair Yunus, who was mentioning that maybe whosoever has the resources in that case, they can also channel those resources towards making it sustainable from the export lens. But if, for example, we are just talking about the advocacy and awareness in the corridors which aren't making those decisions, in that case it's futile. So what's your opinion on that particular that whosoever has the power, whosoever has the resources, only those can make the change, and if they're investing in right sectors, maybe the change is in the offing.
I think if you look at it from the numbers point of view, like if there is some investment in the agriculture, look, if there is FDI in the country and it is increasing our productivity, it will be beneficial. Any FDI which improves agricultural yields or increases our agriculture output in terms of numbers, it will benefit Pakistan. There is no two ways about that. But we also have to look at the legal kind of things, and what will this policy have an impact on the country maybe 10 years down the road. How will that impact our investment policy going forward? Will we have to
Mhm.
attract these investors in these way after 10 years as well? So that is something which the policymakers have to think about in terms of how they want to take this country forward in the longer term. But in the short term, if this investment materializes and there is an increase in agricultural output, because if we compare our agricultural yields to the region, even to India, they are I think at least 30 to 40% below what India is producing. So there is definitely some aspect of improvement over there, but how we do things and what repercussions it has down the line after maybe a decade is something I think beyond my expertise, but it's something which should be considered by the policymakers, definitely.
Absolutely. I think that's also a great statement that you have made. So I think if we just talk about the regional players, for example, India, and we see their growth. Uh, they are basically a $1 trillion economy now, and from that lens, uh, if we just compare the per capita income, there is not much difference between Pakistan and India because of the scale of population that they have. So what's your opinion in the case where we would like to move towards the social mobility and have the inclusive growth as well for the people? Are there any kind of measures that people need to take, maybe from the reskilling standpoint, maybe attracting the right kind of FDI? there could be other insights that you can share.
I think two or three no-brainer policies for Pakistan. One of them is the IT policy, and if we get this right, it is like the freelancers will benefit a lot from it. It won't be like one big industrialist benefits. Even if there is a billion-dollar IT company, it will be employing at least probably 100,000 people or 25,000 people. So it will
Yeah,
benefit the masses as well. And other than that, one other thing we really need to focus on is women empowerment. To this date,
absolutely.
our contribution in the GDP from the female labor force is very, very minimal. So these are two things. If we get this right, this will help us in our productivity as well from the female labor participation. And if we get the other policy right, the IT policy, this will benefit the kind of educated population of Pakistan as well as improve our exports as well. So there are these kind of things. Another one which comes to
Absolutely.
mind is we should invest in public transport.
Yeah,
We are an oil importing country. Now we are importing almost 80% of our oil. So investing in public transport will improve that as well. Now everybody, whether they're using a motorbike or a car, they are consuming much more fuel to travel the same distance, and it's much more expensive for them as well. So these kind of policies, they have more of like 5 to 10 year horizon, but they have become such no-brainers for Pakistan right now that the next incoming government has to take steps in this regard.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think these are also, again, great pointers. So I was going through your Twitter. You mentioned basically there is uh, certain steps being taken to remove subsidies. For example, from 17 to 22 grade, they have removed the free electricity allowance. And there is also a privatization. So do you think these such kind of measures make any kind of significant difference? Or the second question is regarding the discourse, because it's in line with the WAPDA employees. So if we talk about the privatization, what kind of privatization do you think we should go towards? Because people generally say that uh, in and of itself, privatization isn't wrong, but the kind of privatization that you're doing is generally defining the trajectory that you would be taking.
So, if we look at the state-owned enterprises, they are
Yeah.
contributing almost 500 to maybe last year they contributed around 1,000 billion in losses, and almost 50% of this comes from the power sector, the discos.
Mhm.
So Pakistan has to decide that they cannot maintain these kind of losses. Now, either they have to privatize the discos or they have to make them operatively much more efficient. These losses cannot contain. And another sector which contributes a lot to the SOE losses is PIA. So almost they have an accumulated losses of like 600-700 billion, and each year they are paying interest of 100 billion, which is their like bottom line. So I understand when someone says that you have to get the privatization right for discourse, because there is no as such participation of private sector today. So we have to make a policy
Yeah.
as well. We have to have a strong regulator. Is we have to also keep in mind that uh, we might not end up in a place that people are buying even more expensive electricity when we privatize this
Yeah.
resource. But for PIA, we already have 3 to 4 local airlines. We have multiple foreign airlines which are operating. So the regulations and everything is already there. If another private sector player comes into this industry, we don't need to rewrite the rules, or there is no chance that they will be able to exploit the consumers or the other players as well. So
Mhm.
for power sector, we maybe have to come up with some rules. How will the discos price the electricity? How will the gas distribution companies price the electricity? Because we have to protect our consumers as well. Having said that, it's still very important. This is no excuse for not doing privatization. These kind of losses of 500 billion per year, 1,000 billion per year cannot continue.
Sure thing. And do you have any examples of, the other regional examples or, global examples where the distribution is privatized? Because, typically people say that the service delivery, it comes in the service delivery that we do have the basic necessities being delivered by the government, not through the private channel, because there is a chance for exploitation, like you alluded to, and also, the monopolization of that particular sector.
I think there are multiple examples worldwide. When I was studying in the UK, I think most of the distribution energy companies are private over there. And even in Pakistan, there is K Electric, which people have a mixed opinion. Okay, they have not been able to perform that much as much they promised. But having said that, the losses in K Electric were around 40% when they were privatized, and now they are close to 17%. And even this privatization wasn't complete. It wasn't like they were allowed to have their own power plants and sell at their own price. Only the aspect of distribution was privatized, and there were some benchmarks that we will give you this much compensation. If the losses are above this, you will have to bear that. So even this was not
Sure.
complete privatization. A complete privatization would be that anyone can set up a power plant in Pakistan, anyone can buy from any disco, and any power plant can supply to any disco. That is full privatization or full deregulation, as we say. And if the government is really concerned that consumers will be worse off if this happens, they can have one of their own company as well in this industry. If the private
Just to
sector is
baseline.
charging, yeah, if the private sector is charging, let's say 30 rupees per unit, their own company can come in and supply it at 25 if they think they are making a lot of profit. So there are many
Makes sense.
ways that the government can make sure that the consumer is protected. But using this excuse to fully control the policy of this sector, the energy sector is really huge. If you look at our electricity cost, it is around 3 trillion per year. That is almost $10 billion. And if we include gas in that, it will probably be around $5 billion. So inefficiencies in such an industry, which is a major input for the industrial sector as well, cannot continue. You cannot operate the energy sector inefficiently.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I think so people also talk about, going towards a solar policy where there is net metering and, you're selling back to the government. I think that's also curtailed. Uh, what's your opinion regarding that particular, can we continue? And on to the fuel side of things, there is a transition towards the electric car, which are basically not being assembled locally. So that's, we are, gaining from one end and losing from the other end from the import lens. So, uh, what's your opinion regarding that?
Regarding the solar net metering, if you ask from the regulators or from the people who are saying that solar net metering should be curtailed, there is only one argument, that we already have a lot of excess capacity and we need to
Yeah.
use it. If people put up the solar panels, then who will consume this electricity? So for that, I think we have to move towards greener energy as well. One policy,
Is it the sorry to cut you off? Is it the bad contracts that we did in past, or can't we just move out of those contracts? Or, if we are talking about the IPPs, uh, is it because of that? Because in that case, we need to buy a certain amount of electricity from them.
no, I don't think the contracts were bad as such, keeping in mind what was the situation of Pakistan.
Yeah.
See, I will explain to you in 1 minute. A power plant, when it sets up in Pakistan, it cannot sell electricity to anyone other than government of Pakistan. Let's imagine you are making a podcast, you put it on YouTube, anyone can come and watch it. One day YouTube says that I will decide that who can watch your podcast, or I am the only one who will watch your podcast. Then you will always come to them and say, what will be my compensation? You will have to fix my compensation because you are restricting my ability to supply in the market. Obviously, you will think that these are my costs and I have to cover them. So this single buyer model, where government of Pakistan is the single buyer, because of this, IPPs have to be given a capacity payment. Capacity payment, almost 60% of it is actually debt repayment. These plants are always built on around 75-25%. 75% is debt, and 25% is actually investment in terms of equity. So when you have to pay down your debt, you have to earn a return on your equity, and you can only sell to one person. So then that one person has to give you a capacity payment. We have been thinking, because lately capacity payments are around 70% of the total cost, we are thinking that these things are free. If we negotiate, we can bring this down to zero. That's not possible. The best way forward is to end this single buyer model. Allow a multi-buyer model where anyone can sell to anyone at what price they want. And then when we think of these contracts, there are 2 to 3 arguments. We installed too many power plants. We installed the wrong fuel. We shouldn't have gone for imported fuel, LNG. These were expensive. We should have gone for thermal. We shouldn't have taken debt for 10 years. We should have taken it for 30 years. All these problems will be solved if you go to multi-buyer model. When there will be a multi-buyer model, the investor will decide. He will take a call on the best fuel. He will take a call on how long should be the tenure of the debt. He will take a call whether Pakistan needs energy after 10 years, whether we should go for this investment or not. All these problems for IPPs are coming back to the single buyer model. That is the crux of the issue.
Okay. Makes sense. And I think, like you're saying, so they will decide their unit economics. Currently, I think since it's a single buyer model. So when we say the multi-buyer, do they sell outside of Pakistan, or for example, the regional countries, the neighboring country?
Okay. Yeah, they can. It can be classified as an export, but even if you do it for Pakistan, and because sometimes this might lead to a situation where electricity can be supplied to, let's say, a neighboring country at a higher price, and the power plants are preferring to supply it internationally instead of supplying the local market. So there can be some regulations regarding that as well. But even if you do it for Pakistan, it will be a major policy shift and be very beneficial for Pakistan. There were some developments in this regard in 2020. Yeah, so there was some developments. It was called the CTBCM model, where multi-buyer model was being allowed for customers above 1 megawatt. So even that has been derailed in the last 2-3 years. So we have to go back to that. We have to open up the market. If we expect the government to take the right decisions for the next 30 years, if they have to decide what will be the best fuel, if they have to decide how much power we will need, if they have to decide how much return we should pay to the investors, unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, they will take the wrong decisions. So the best way forward is to bring in the private sector. So when they have their equity on the line, their investment on the line, they will think more rigorously about these decisions.
And I think you're absolutely right, but I think there is a counter argument, which they say that basically, in the cases where they're autonomous, in that case, they would be taking the decision from only the personal lens or the individualistic lens. And in that case, they can, throw certain sectors under the bus, maybe, charging on the higher price, just to, make themselves sustainable. So so we can't deregularize entirely, and we can't have the regulation in place on all the, the hops. I think maybe the middle ground would be the right approach. What do you think?
Obviously, this concern is very valid, and like we discussed earlier as well, and we are just like highlighting the problems over here. I'm not recommending a full policy. This is
Yeah.
beyond my expertise. The energy experts will obviously go into depth each clause of the regulations. They will draft that. But
Mhm.
two things we can do to counter this concern. One is we can have a strong regulator, and the second one is if government wishes, it can have its own company, like we discussed in the discourse. The government can have its own
Yeah.
generation company as well,
Just to benchmark.
yeah, which is also taking these decisions. If they are taking better decisions than the private sector and they are able to supply electricity at a much cheaper rate than other private sector players, then private sector players will have to improve themselves or they will have to incur losses. So they can be part of that
Makes sense.
industry as well and compete in a level playing field.
Makes absolute sense. So I think I would like to shift gears towards the stock market and the investment. I think you are also, like you said, that you are basically a full-time investor now. So if, for example, we talk about a person who is trying to start today, what's basically the strategy that they need to start with?
They have to keep two things in mind. One
Mhm.
is first they have to understand what is the stock market. Stock market is a place where you can become a partner in a business um, at any time, and then
Mhm.
you can choose from 300 different companies as well. So that's the flexibility that stock market offers. But when you have so much choice, you also have to have the expertise to choose wisely. So for
Yeah.
that, I always recommend always start with companies in the industry you work in or you have expertise in. For example,
Mhm.
you might have a lot of expertise about the IT industry. You will know what is going on in the industry, which company is good, what are their future plans. And when you read their annual reports, you will get a hold of that language. If you are working in the IT industry and you pick up an annual report of a power company, there are very high chances that you will become confused and you will take the wrong decision. So first understand that there will be volatility in the market. The returns in stock market can vary from year to year, but over the longer term, they are much higher than fixed income. So that is one aspect
Mhm.
that you have to keep in mind that volatility will be there. And the second aspect is what I usually say on Twitter as well: invest in what you fully understand. And that basically
Sure.
means in terms of actions that start off in the industry where you are working, and then slowly you can develop
Sorry.
expertise in other industries as well, because at the end of the day you have to determine the value of a business, what it will generate in the future years. That is the fair price for a business.
Makes absolute sense. And I think इसमें ये argument भी तो है कि basically if we are investing in a company which we fully understand but has a, lower return. For example, if it's a long-term game, in that case, maybe I can, invest in power and just sit back without seeing any kind of trends, because in the trends I can make the wrong decision. Do you think it's a right approach, or uh,
First, like internationally best investors would classify this as area of competence. So first you have to define that
area
circle.
competence? Okay.
These are my industries which I understand. And then
Okay.
among those, you have to have a portfolio of best investments. Whichever companies you think offer the best investment in whatever time frame you are looking at, whether it is 1 year or
Sure.
3 years or 5 years. So then you
Mhm.
can choose amongst them. Some people diversify a lot. They would have like 25 companies in their portfolio. But I usually recommend 7 to 8. And the reason
7
for
to 8.
that,
Okay.
yeah, 7 to 8,
Mhm.
because let's say you analyzed 100 companies which were in your area of competence, and the top one was offering you 50% return, and the one on the 15th rank was offering you 20% return. Why would you want to invest in the 15th company when you can invest more amount in the first one? So as you go down the ladder, the
Mhm.
potential return decreases. So having a little bit of diversification which protects you from taking the wrong decision, or in when you're investing in the stock market, you don't have control over the price. You cannot say that this share will rise in the next 1 year. It might take 1 to 2 years for it to realize its value as well. So having a little bit of diversification without sacrificing the overall return at play, I think is the best way to go forward.
Absolutely. And if we talk about a newbie, so how do they start? Basically, they reach out to a brokerage company, they create an account, and then start
It's
diversifying maybe
easy now.
into.
Yeah, it's pretty easy now.
Sorry.
Recently, I think 6 months back, uh,
Mhm.
Stock Exchange launched this account called Sahulat account, in which I think you can invest 8 to 10 lakhs without any rigorous KYC. You just need your CNIC and maybe one other document, and you can invest up to 8 to 10 lakh rupees. And otherwise, as well, entire brokerage industry only works on the banking sector. You cannot give them cash. All transfers have to be made via the bank account. So everything is very streamlined. One thing you can do is always work
Mhm.
with a renowned broker, someone who
Mhm.
is in the top tier. And if you want to be extra safe as well, there is an investor account with CDC. CDC is the Central Depository Company. So when you have
Yeah.
bought your shares, you can transfer your shares to CDC. There you will have full custody of your shares. So ये जो थोड़े
Mhm.
बहुत brokerage के default के चीजें हुई भी हैं in the past, most of them have been very like third tier, fourth tier brokerage houses. But if your shares are in CDC investor account, you will be safe from any such scenario.
Makes absolute sense. And people generally talk about, for example, the kind of investment. So a stock exchange is one. There is also a mutual fund or the bank savings, or you can say people buy currencies as well. There is a trend towards real estate as well. So I think 3, 4 kinds of type of investments are there in the market. What's the sweet spot? Maybe diversification should be in all these sectors, or again, the advice is that we need to understand what we are investing in and then take the decision
In
based on
any
that. And
country,
in terms of the return as well.
yeah, I think in any country there are four major investments, like you said. So there is real estate, there is fixed income, then there is currency. I would classify currency and commodities together because most of the commodities are also dollar linked. Many people in Pakistan invest in commodities as well.
Mhm.
And the fourth one is the stock market. So in terms of long term returns, stock market has beaten fixed income and currency as well. But in the last 5 years, it has not done so well. But that's
Mhm.
true for other countries as well. Even in the US, from 2009, no, from 2000 till 2009, it was called the lost decade. The market was so high in 2000,
Yeah.
and then it dropped, it recovered a little bit, and it dropped again in 2009. So for that entire decade, the return was 0%. The stock market was where it was in 2000, and it was at the same levels in 2009 as well. So this happens throughout the world as well. And because last few years have not been good for the stock market, and when some people face losses, then it's very hard to get over it. But if you look at the longer term,
Long term. Mhm.
yeah, like 15 years, 20 years, stock market has beaten fixed income for sure, and by far. And for real estate, we usually don't get that much data in Pakistan. Usually people are comparing like this phase of defense against this particular property of area town, which is
Yeah.
fundamentally wrong. You cannot compare one property against the entire stock market. For a fair comparison, you have to use a basket. And I think for that, Zameen.com did a research, I think in 2021, and it said
Mhm.
that returns in real estate were around 15%, which were very
Okay.
close to what the stock market offers as well. So when it comes to
What?
allocation, I would say ke invest in what you understand. Because if you understand real estate much better than the stock market, then you will
Mhm.
probably earn more returns in real estate. But if you are a fully passive investor, then probably diversification would be better.
I'd say there's a question here regarding real estate investments and also the stock because both are local. Uh, and comparing that to the currency, because in the short term we have seen the currency has depreciated. almost 100% or 90% of that. So if we are saying that basically, for example, I earn 1 crore out of real estate, and that's basically over a course of 5 years. In that case, how does the currency depreciation comes into play? Because I think in that particular case, if we talk about the loss on the devaluation, I think he might be sitting at the same income bracket that he was 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think the both of these markets, stock market and real estate, are inversely related to PKR devaluation. If there is devaluation and at such rapid pace, both of these markets will not be able to catch up with the loss in value of currency. Like in the last 2 years, stock market has been down, even though it has recovered in the last 6 months. But generally, the real estate has also not performed, because then it
Yeah.
comes to a point where there are dark shadows on the future economy of Pakistan, and both of these are like local assets, so both of these suffer. So probably if you are seeing a lot of devaluation in the future, best way would be to hedge in commodities which are dollar linked, which are priced in dollars. And the legal mechanism, the formal mechanism for that is Pakistan Mercantile Exchange. They have a lot of gold contracts. They have a lot of like oil contracts. So if you want to invest in dollar-linked commodities, I think that could be a best way. But when these things recover, we have seen that when the country's economy outlook is good, then stock market also really performs well, and then real estate also recovers.
Makes absolute sense. And if we are just talking about the legality of things, so there's also a term that dollar hoarding, or you can say the currency hoarding. And if we just compare all of these, for example, the real estate versus bank investments versus stocks, what's the low risk in that particular sense? If who protects the investor most?
I think let's just start off with the banks. Banks in Pakistan, the big banks are very well capitalized, so they are very safe in terms of like the principal you are investing. The amount you get on it might be low over the longer term, but the principal is very much safe. Then in stocks as well, if you are investing in a diversified portfolio, then most probably the return will be good, as well as the principal will be safe as well. Because when you are investing in a diversified portfolio, you will most probably have larger companies which won't go bankrupt or won't go to zero. Their price may decline. As I said, the volatility is part of the stock market, but overall, in a longer term, they would be pretty good as well. When it comes to the currency, I would not recommend anyone to do that. If they really want to bet on devaluation, please go to Pakistan Mercantile Exchange. Uh, there you can trade the currency as well as other commodities, and if there is any devaluation, you can benefit from that. There is nothing wrong with that. If you think that the PKR is going to devalue, you can allocate your capital in that market as well.
Fascinating. I think this is great. If we talk about, for example, investment into 5 top companies, you mentioned about the blue chip companies, for example. So what are those companies in Pakistan? If we talk about just across the industries, maybe in IT, maybe, in FMCG and other sectors, what would be the 5 companies that you recommend to a person who would like to invest safely and over a longer period of time?
I think if you are not someone who's doing it actively and cannot monitor on a weekly basis or even on a monthly basis, I think a very good metric for judging profit making ability of a company is use its last 15 to 20 years data.
The short edition.
There is a return on investment calculator on sarmaya.pk, where you can check the return on investment if you had invested in the companies 20 years back. So if that return is above 20%, 15% per year, that there is a very good chance that that company will perform in the future as well. I am more of an active participant. I keep looking at companies which are doing well, which are really undervalued, which will come back to their value in the next 1 to 2 years. So I use that metric, but I use other metrics as well, like business performance, monitoring their business performance on a quarterly basis. But a few good companies which I have highlighted, which perform well on both these metrics. One of them is Mari Petroleum, and another is Systems Limited in the IT industry. I think these are two companies which are really protected from devaluation. One of them is a gas producer, so their price is also linked to the dollar. Systems is a Pakistan's IT largest exporter. They are also kind of hedged against any devaluation. So these are two companies which I've highlighted, which have really good potential in the future, no matter what happens. Because Pakistan will remain a gas deficit country, and Pakistan will remain a kind of export starved country. So both of these companies are really well positioned in terms of their economics. But
Makes absolute sense.
you have to keep monitoring their business performance, how they're doing. If systems for
Obviously,
some reason after a
any
few
company
years
can
not
close.
that that well, so then you might have to reconsider. But economically, both of these companies are really well positioned.
Makes absolute sense. And I think you're absolutely right that we need to monitor over the course of time, especially in the tech sector, because things are depleting faster than you can think. Uh, and I think if we are talking about the stock market, it's also dependent on the political situation. I think in one of the Twitter tweets or somewhere you mentioned that it's basically forward looking. So maybe for the listeners, what does that mean? And if we are talking about the age of AI, in that case, can we predict those trends for the future?
I think a lot of people sometimes get confused seeing that, like, let's say, let's take the example of today. Every month, inflation is almost close to 30%. Interest rates are so high. But in the last almost 3 months, 3.5 months, stock market has been up around 16, 17%. So this is how can this happen? Economy is doing bad, but how is the stock market going up? And the number one reason is stock market is forward looking. The value of a business is the future profits it will make. So whenever the future outlook is very grim, stock market will start declining in advance, which happened in early FY22 when economy numbers were really good. Growth was at 6%, LSM was plus 10, 8%. But because people were seeing the risks, which might be visible after a year, so the trend started downwards. And now, when things are a little bit stabilizing, stock market is kind of pricing that in already, even though a normal person who's following the economy might see those numbers after 1 year, but it is all is happening in anticipation because the value of a business stock market index is average of 100 companies. So each company, when its future outlook of making profits is improving, so then the value of the index also increases.
Makes sense. Makes absolute sense. Fascinating. So this, I think, one of the last questions, maybe if you can talk about the early lessons or mistakes that people can learn from while investing, and what are those and how to mitigate those. I think you've mentioned some of the mitigation strategies, but maybe the mistakes.
Yeah, I think number one would be that always invest in your area of competence. I think that is the number one. Many people would say invest what you are willing to lose or invest only this percentage of your income. But I would say a better what you call a prerequisite is understand what you are investing in. Once you understand it, then even if you allocate a little bit extra, or even if you're investing 25% of your income, you won't go wrong. The more of the risk is not knowing what you are understanding. Oh, sorry, not knowing what you are investing in. I think that is the
Right.
number one risk. And then after that, it becomes more towards portfolio allocation. How many stocks should you buy? What should be your split? So in terms of that, you can do diversification in 7 to 8 companies. And when you're doing the 7 to 8 companies, you can have them probably from 3 to 4 different industries as well. So do the diversification in terms of whether their pricing is dollar hedged, or whether they have the ability to pass on the price if their raw material prices increases. So you can do a little bit of diversification on that front. But I think the number one takeaway I always say is always first learn about the company and then invest. A lot of people, let's say they're investing 1 lakh rupees and it took them 1 month to earn that, but they would take that investing decision in probably 10 minutes because someone said it to them. So if it took you almost 1 month to earn that income, now at least you should spend 1 day or 1.5 day researching about the company, then invest your money.
Absolutely. I think these are all fascinating insights. So thank you for sharing that. As a wrap up, I think what would be the advice that you would like to give to the listeners? It could be a journal advice or a short-term advice, maybe what's happening or coming in the offing in a year or so. So invest in certain things, or maybe learning something from that lens. So it's up to you. Whatever the advice you would like to share.
I myself am very young. So a lot of young Pakistanis, because of the economic outlook, are very depressed. So I would say to them, if you can invest in yourself, which is improving your abilities, improving your skill set, if you can invest in that, whatever the economic scenario in Pakistan, you can have a good living after a few years as well. So if you are really concerned about your future in Pakistan, you should invest a lot of time in improving yourself. Don't spend too much time in analyzing what other people are doing. It is the policy makers who are not being fair to us. But invest more time in your own skill set, improve yourself, and then probably after a few years you will be in a better position.
Amazing. I think you're absolutely spot on that basically grumbling doesn't help. I think that's the only skill that basically you invest in yourself, and in that case, nobody can snatch that from you. So that's the least that you can do. I think it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I got to learn a lot as well, like I do from your Twitter tweets. So thank you so much for coming onto the show on such short notice, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, and I enjoyed our discussion as well. And if there are any questions from our audience regarding the stock market or anything else, please write those in the comments, and I would answer them myself as well. Thank you everyone for taking out time and listening to our discussion.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care. Laugh.